Hi guys, and welcome back to Cineclub. It has been quite a while since I've sat down to make one of these videos, so bear with me if I'm a little bit rusty, but I'm excited about this list we're going to talk about today. So everybody knows music is super important when it comes to movies. It can make a particular scene stand out, it can make us sad, it just sets the tone of the entire movie. And while there have been amazing soundtracks for very iconic movies, these are the 9 that I consider to be the best soundtracks of all time. Now keep in mind, I am not including any composers and any scores in this list. That's a completely different list. For this one, I'm going to pick the soundtracks that focus on songs selected for a movie or songs that have been composed specifically for one movie. And keep in mind, this is just my opinion. These are just the soundtracks I feel you can listen to as a great album that really make the movie stand out and you should really have in your collection. So let's get started. Now the first one I'm going to pick is one that I'm sure you're all thinking about. It has been one of the best soundtracks in the past few years, and that is of course Guardians of the Galaxy. While a lot of people love this movie, every time someone talks about it, they just can't help mention how great and fun this soundtrack is. The album was the US second best-selling soundtrack of 2014, only behind the soundtrack to Frozen. Okay. The music is very linked to the story, since what we're mostly hearing is Peter Quill's Walkman and the music his mom left to him before she passed away. So you got a lot of great hits from the 70s and the 80s, and it just brings like a really good mood to the entire movie. I think most of the music was selected by the director of the movie, and I have no doubts he took notes from Quentin Tarantino's style, because what you end up getting is like this nostalgia feeling of songs that sound really familiar, but there are also songs that have kind of been lost in time. Normally I would be super hipster about people really loving this soundtrack because they're songs that they should already really know and I've known for quite a long time, but I really can't help being very happy that people love it because it just shows you that good music always stands out and people always recognize it. The next soundtrack on our list is one that always makes me super sad and very existential, but I can't help knowing that it's actually quite brilliant, and that is the soundtrack of The Graduate. The Graduate has always been called a comedy, and I personally have never seen it because what you get most of the time is this melancholic theme of this post-college life of this kid. He doesn't really know what he wants to do, he doesn't know who he is, and he ends up having this affair with this older woman, and it's just this sort of uncertain, sad feeling to the entire movie. And that's exactly what Simon and Garfunkel's songs just bring to this movie. You got songs like Mrs. Robinson, which is a little bit more poppy and fun, and then you got The Sound of Silence, which is really heavy. And you also have Scarborough Fair. It's just a great soundtrack and a great moment for this band. And in the 60s, where contemporary songs were really used for narrative purpose and not for ambient, it was just such a bold move, and it's one of those soundtracks that people keep talking on and on about. The next one I think really highlights the young British culture of the 90s, and that is from the movie Trainspotting. It's impossible for me to listen to Iggy Pop's Lust for Life and not imagine Ewan McGregor running down the street with his buddies as a crazy heroin addict trying to escape the police. It really tries to just showcase the music interest of the young crowd at this decade. It was like the acid punk era of music, and a lot of interesting bands came around that time, so you got stuff like Lou Reed and Iggy Pop, Brian Eno, New Order, Bedrock, and it just shows you in such a great way the out of control, out of body experience that these kids were having in this story. Now for the next one is a soundtrack that everybody talks about, that it has been, I think, more than 20 years now, and everybody still talks about it, and that is of course Pulp Fiction. Now to be completely fair, I could have picked any of Quentin Tarantino's movie for this spot. Actually, I could have made the entire list about Quentin Tarantino, but I just think Pulp Fiction happens to be the most iconic out of all of them. Look, the truth is nobody can find great music and put it in their movies like Tarantino has done for so many years. He just has a way of dusting off these old hits that were not exactly so very well remembered, but now he brings them back, and it's mind-blowing. I absolutely love everything that he does with music. In most movies, you kind of pick up 1 or 2 songs that you really like or that you can recognize, but in Pulp Fiction, it's like the entire freaking thing. You got amazing stuff like Jungle Boogie, you got Al Green's Let's Stay Together, you have Son of a Preacher, you have Girl You'll Be a Woman Soon, which if you can think of that song and not imagine Uma Thurman just dancing around crazily and snorting cocaine, then I don't know what you're thinking about. The list really goes on, and there's not really much to say. Quentin Tarantino is the master, and you know he is. The next one is an album that people normally forget that it's made for a movie and it's not this particular artist's album. But yeah, it's true, and that is, of course, Purple Rain. Purple Rain is easily one of Prince's best albums of all time. While the movie is sort of semi-autobiographical, and it follows the story you know so well of a struggling artist falling in love, falling out of love, trying to make his music work, the songs that Prince made for this album are just timeless and powerful and so good at telling a story in itself. With amazing musical hits like Darling Nikki, When Doves Cry, and of course Purple Rain, the album in my opinion is just exquisite and flawless. And if you haven't heard it yet, I highly recommend it because Prince is a musical genius, and that is not my opinion, that is a fact. The next one for me is just one of my personal favorites, and I'm not making these in any particular order, but I'm just letting you know this one just really warms my heart and it makes me feel comfy, and it reminds me of a very simpler time in my life, and that is Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. It's a bit of a random choice. It's mostly like indie pop rock, but I just think it's so nice to listen to, and it just plays so well with the movie because it's very directly connected to the story. The story is about these two teenagers who are trying to look for this mysterious band one night in New York. It's their favorite band, and they kind of don't know where they're going to actually play at, so they're just on this quest to finding their favorite band. Now, along the way, they realize they have a really strong connection musically, and they like the same songs and the same bands, and there's just like this unspoken connection between them that could possibly lead to something more. Now, they kind of know about each other because of some friends, but they've never actually met. But Nora actually knows more about Nick because she has secretly heard all of the mixtapes he has made for his ex-girlfriend. So it's really sweet, and they kind of figure out that they have that connection along the movie, and whatever you're listening to, it's actually what they're listening to, so it's like you're sharing this really cool indie mixtape together. Really great, wholesome music that I think people should listen to. My favorite one was Baby You're My Light and Last Words. I think it's Last Words. Yeah, the movie starts and ends with that song. It just goes so well with the feel of New York City and what's going on with these characters. I really recommend it. It's one that I can listen to all day long. Now, the next one is another that was actually made for a movie, yet I always feel like it's the artist's best album ever, and that is Whitney Houston's The Bodyguard. I mean, if you're one of those people that ever question Whitney Houston's amazing voice, this is the album you have to listen to. She hits some notes that you just don't feel like it's possible to do, and she does it with such ease and such grace, and there's such a heartache tone to the whole thing. It just blows my mind. With songs like Of Course, I Will Always Love You, and Chaka Khan's I'm Every Woman, it's just such a girl power kind of album as well, and to me it's just very nostalgic because it's an album I heard when I was a little kid. My dad would put it on a lot because he really liked the music, and I just felt like Whitney Houston was just the best thing ever, and I would sing Queen of the Night like I was the best thing that had ever walked this earth, and it just reminds me of a time where I was really sure about who I was and really in love with her voice, and not to mention the movie is also really fantastic. Now, the next one on the list is like hearing the greatest hits from the 90s, and you can't deny it the moment you hear one song, and that comes from Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. The sexy remake of Shakespeare's tragedy is actually set in the 90s, and it wasn't something you would have thought about much seeing it back then, but seeing it about 20 years later, you realize how much the music was of that time. And the great thing about it is that it doesn't get stuck in one particular trend of the 90s, it just encompasses the entire feel of that decade, from the pop songs to the beautiful ballads to the punk rock to just absolutely everything that happened during that time. And it's the best part of it. It's like those songs that you would pick up like that, and it might sound cheesy now, but there's just something really nice about it. I mean, you have so many great bands that define the 90s. You have Garbage and Everclear and Radiohead. It's just all over the place. The Cardigans as well. They're just so great, and it just makes you feel like you're back in that time. But in my opinion, the best music moment in the movie is Desiree's Kissing You, which I think it was either made for the movie or it becomes the theme of Romeo and Juliet throughout the movie. And it's the moment where they see each other through the fish tank and they meet for the very first time. The song is just haunting and romantic and beautiful, and will always remind me of Romeo and Juliet. Now, for the last selection, my personal choice is the soundtrack of The Watchmen. I find that this movie can be quite an argument when you bring it up in conversation. Some people hate it, some people really love it, but in my opinion it was one of these underrated superhero movies that happens to be one of the best ones ever made. And one of the reasons I think the movie is so good is because the music happens to mirror the story and the decades it goes through so well. It's a story of these superheroes from the 50s and how they become vigilantes throughout the 60s and the 70s because the world supposedly doesn't need superheroes anymore. And so you have quite a wide range of artists and music and genres that can play very well with the story. It goes from really modern ballads to the crooners to rock and roll. It's just got a bit of everything. You got stuff like Unforgettable by Nat King Cole, you got Times Are Changing by Bob Dylan, you have All Along the Watchtower, Jimi Hendrix, Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, Me and Bobby McGee, I'm Your Boogeyman, The Sound of Silence Once Again. It's just a wholesome, great rock and roll, great music album that I think everybody should listen to. It kind of reminds me of Guardians of the Galaxy in that sense that you go like, oh, I know that song was great. So while I really like the movie, and people might not share that opinion, I think nobody can debate the fact that it's a great soundtrack. So guys, that's my list of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Tell me which one are yours. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. You know it's always appreciated. And if you like this sort of stuff and you like movie reviews and anything related to movies, I hope you subscribe to the channel because we do this every week and it's a lot of fun. But until then, I hope you have a great week. I hope you get to watch a lot of movies and I will see you on our next movie talk. Bye!